So just cut. Yeah, yeah. Good to see everybody. Man, it's funny when Seattle people complain about the sun. You know, I love it. Like my kids drive in the car, Lizzie will be in the back seat. Dad, can you close the sunroof, please? Like we live in Seattle, man. We got to get all the sun, take it in. Don't like it. Yeah. All right, we're going to talk about community. I told you last week that I wouldn't guilt you last week, so I could wait and guilt you today. So here we go. We have a 20-year-old daughter, which makes me feel incredibly old. We just celebrated her 20th birthday on Thursday. When she was 14 months old, I was changing her diaper. I was out golfing with a friend. I came home, changing her diaper, and she had this little lump on her shoulder, and we thought, I don't remember if we took her to the doctor right away. We did, because that's the first kid. Of course we did. And they said, just watch it. And so the next day it was bigger, and we were back at the doctor. And the next day it was twice the size as it was the day before. And after a few days, it was huge. It was like a softball. Thank you. And we were at Children's Hospital, where we spent the next 12 nights waiting for them to get Gracie healthy enough to have surgery to remove this thing. So it was a terrifying experience for parents who waited forever. We waited 12 years before she came into our lives, and now our firstborn child has this massive tumor, which was benign, but it was scary. And one of the ways that we got through that experience is that we had community. We had people around us who cared for us. We had people who showed up at the hospital. We had people in our lives that did more than say, just let us know what we can do for you. You know, when people are suffering and we say, just tell me how I can help you. We put the onus on the person suffering to tell us how they need us to help, right? I do that all the time. But we had people in our lives that didn't do that. They showed up at the hospital. They brought us food. They brought Gracie. They distracted her with stuffed animals. And we got through it because we had community. Now, 20 years later, her sister has the same thing on her head, far scarier, but we took it in stride, no big deal. Third kid, man. Third kid. We didn't really even parent her that much. Sorry, Liz. We're too old. So I have a friend, Matt Conrad. He's the executive pastor at Westminster Chapel. He had 2 different kinds of leukemias within like 2.5 years. He had a better chance of winning like the mega lottery or the big lottery twice than getting leukemia like this twice. His first leukemia was hairy cell leukemia, and the second one was acute myeloid. So he calls the first one the good leukemia and the second one the bad leukemia, because he had to have a bone marrow transplant the second time. While he was in the first leukemia, he said, Todd, I know why people who have cancer give up. I know why they just want to give in, especially because it's so hard. And if you don't have community around you, if you don't have people who are there for you, if you don't have people who are praying for you and supporting you and encouraging you, man, it's just easy to give up. We all could tell stories like this. You know, we've all gone through storms in our life. Most of us, we could tell a story about feeling helpless as we sat next to somebody we loved who was suffering, but there was nothing we can do about it. It might even be true that some of us in a crowd that's this size, we are weathering some kind of storm in our life right now. The issue in our life isn't, is another storm going to come? The issue is, when is the next storm going to come? And when that storm comes, the question is, will we be weathering that storm alone, or will we have people who surround us and take care of us, provide for us, love us, in the midst of that storm, to get us through to the other side of that storm? When the pain and uncertainty of life storms hit, we need that. We need people from branches. We need this community to surround us. And when they do, when they surround us, when they love us, when they even provide for us, it makes all the difference in what that storm does to us and how we get through that storm. There's such an undeniable sweetness to biblical community when it's firing on all cylinders, when we are the church that we're supposed to be. It's a very beautiful thing. So Tim said, we're launching Rooted next Sunday, and we're doing that because it's the best way we know how to provide dynamic, transformational, and healthy community, the kind that every single one of us in this room needs. Tim and I were talking while we were up at Camino. We want branches to be the kind of place where everyone who comes in here is known and loved as they really are and not as anybody thinks they should be, right? You can come in and just be yourself. We'll love you right where you're at, and we'll welcome you into community and introduce you to Jesus. And we want to build that type of community where everyone is fully loved, fully supported, and fully surrounded when they need it. And the best way we know how to do that is in groups, and those groups start with Rooted. So we've been through Rooted a couple of times, and I can't tell you how it works, but the Holy Spirit somehow uses Rooted to transform lives and establish deep spiritual and relational connections among the people in the group that last, I don't know, I'm going to say a lifetime, because we were in a group, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago, and we are still connected with the people in that group. We've all gone our separate ways, but we haven't disconnected because of the experience that we had in our Rooted group. We're definitely not doing Rooted just to do a program or because we're a church and we should be doing small groups, or definitely not to give you another thing to do that isn't going to add value to your life. We're doing Rooted because it meets a need that every one of us has. In fact, it meets a desperate need that each one of us has to be fully known as we are at the heart level without fear of being judged. Like, we all want that. We all need that. And as humans, we tend to thrive in groups of 8 to 10 people, even introverts. Okay, I'm looking at you. Even introverts, we thrive in groups of 8 to 10 people who are on the life's journey with us, who connect with us on a spiritual level, and who come around us when we need that, and who live on mission together, who are definitely getting after sharing the gospel. When we have several different groups in the church doing that at once in sync, it's a powerful thing, not only for the church and for the people in the groups, but it overflows into the community. The greatest challenge to community is isolation, and I think we all know a little too much about isolation. Some of us are acutely familiar with doing life on our own, right? We don't have, even in the good times in life, in the seasons of warmth and plenty, we don't have people around us to enjoy that with. We kind of do that alone. So when things get rough in our life, when we need people to surround us, when the storms hit, then we certainly don't have community then. Too many of us know what it's like to suffer in silence, right? And in isolation when the storms hit. And what we really need is community, people to come around us. The pain we experience in the storms of life it's hard enough. If we're isolated while those storms hit, that just compounds the problem and the pain exponentially for us. So Kara and I have friends who they tend to isolate, people we love dearly, but they isolate when they're facing difficulty in life, when the storms hit. They retreat from relationship, they retreat from community, and their philosophy in crisis is, this is my problem. I shouldn't burden anybody else with it. I'm just going to retreat from relationship until I figure it out, and once I do, then I'll re-engage, and that's what they try to do. But that's just such a painful thing to do. And I get it. I get why they do that, but it's the worst thing that we can do when the storms hit. Yet most of us would confess to doing something like that, to isolating at some point when some kind of crisis hits our life. I certainly have done that. I wrote a book about it. This is well documented that I have, in seasons of pain and failure and illness, isolated in my life. I've withdrawn from my closest relationships. I've withdrawn from community. I've isolated because I told myself, I really don't want to burden anybody with my problems. But what I really felt was, I don't think anybody cares enough about my problem. I don't think I'm worthy enough to bother anybody with my problems or to ask for help. I've isolated because I've been fearful of being judged or by getting unsolicited and uninformed advice from well-meaning people, When I have, I've isolated also because I've lied to myself and said I can get through this on my own. You ever told yourself that? Yeah, that one's no good. When I first realized I might have an addiction to pain medication, I didn't want to tell anybody about it, certainly not the church that I work for, because I was afraid that I would get fired, and I may have. So I isolated, and I can't tell you what a terrible decision that was, because it not only made my life miserable, it made life miserable for my family and everybody around me. Nothing gets better when we isolate, but I wonder how many of us default to dealing with life and all that it throws at us by trying to figure it out on our own, by isolating, by either keeping it to ourselves or keeping it within our family. I wonder how many of us feel like when the difficult times of life come, we've got to pull ourselves up by our own bootstrap, right? How many of us, either by default or by design, are isolating in some way right now? We're all desperate for community. We desperately need it. We live in a culture where we've got community coming out of our ears, right? Everybody's talking about community, but the community that we experience so often in our culture is increasingly virtual or it's artificial. I go to Woodinville High School twice a week as a sub, and I have students there, even my own daughter, that tells me that they have real friends that they've never physically seen or audibly conversed with, right? All of their interactions are over Snapchat, yet they refer to these people as their friends like I would refer to the friends I physically hung out with when I was their age, right? Even friendships are in isolation. It's entirely possible to be followed and friended and liked by a million people without truly being known by anyone. All right? It's possible to be trending and yet live a life of quiet desperation. That's why we see so many social media influencers taking their own lives, because they may be trending and have 1 million followers, but they are desperately isolated and alone. We isolate because it allows us to project the image we want to project. It allows us to control the image that we send out into the world, right? We're afraid that people will see us as we truly are, because we're sure that they'll judge us, because we compare what we know about ourselves to what we don't know about everybody else. But the truth is we're all messed up, and that's okay. We isolate because of how badly we've been treated in the past, and we don't want to be hurt again. If our heart remains hidden, if we protect it, it can't be broken. So we isolate. And being known as we truly are requires us to be vulnerable. And vulnerability is scary for a lot of us. It might be scary for all of us. We may come from families where it wasn't safe to be vulnerable. So what we did is we built walls to protect ourselves, and we don't get vulnerable. But even some of the walls that we put up makes it look like we love community and we want to engage, and we do, but only when it's good and fun. When things get too real and too close, we tend to retreat because we're afraid of being vulnerable. We prefer to isolate rather than risk being judged for who we really are. We prefer to isolate rather than people find out what we're really like, because we're afraid they'll judge us for who we really are. We want to change that here. We're doing community to turn that stuff, we're doing Rooted to turn that stuff on its head. Okay, that's not who we're going to be here. And the fact is, we are all broken. We are all a bundle of paradoxes I love what I'll just say this. I love what Brennan Manning says. I think I shared this with you before, but this is kind of true of all of us. We're all kind of messed up, and if we own that, then it's easier for us to enter into community together, right? He says, when I get honest, I admit I am a bundle of paradoxes. I believe and I doubt. I hope and I get discouraged. I love and I hate. I feel bad about feeling good. I feel guilty about not feeling guilty. I am trusting and suspicious. I am honest, and I still play games. Aristotle said I am a rational animal. I say I'm an angel with an incredible capacity for beer. Right? Like, there's some truth for all of us in that. We're all kind of all of those things. We're a unique but wonderful bundle of paradoxes who are loved more than we possibly know and are needed desperately by the people around us. We're all imperfect. We're broken shards for sure. But when we come together, when this group of people comes together in community, man, we make up a beautiful mosaic that's not just beautiful for us, it's beautiful for the people who see us from the outside. Proverbs 18:1 says, a person who isolates themselves seeks their own desire. They rage against all wise judgment. It's a pretty powerful statement. Not only is it emotionally and spiritually unhealthy for us to isolate, it's unwise for us to isolate. In isolation, we are left to our own devices. We follow our own perspective. We're subject to our own personal biases, and we rely solely on our own judgment and our own strength to see us through. I don't know about you, but when those things are true in my life, my situation does not get better. It gets worse. And sometimes it gets exponentially worse, because the longer I isolate, the more biased and unsound my judgment becomes. No one's life gets better in isolation. No one's perspective even gets better in isolation. And the church certainly suffers when we isolate. We need everybody in the church to engage in community and to be on mission so that we can impact lives with the gospel. If we're not in community, then our ability to do that is diminished significantly. I'd like to see 100% participation in Rooted. Not so that we can say, hey, look, we got 100%, but because I know what that would mean for us. It would mean something significant for all of us in this room, but it would also mean something significant for the community around us, right? If everybody was doing Rooted, then nobody would be in isolation. If we had 80 to 100 branches people in Rooted groups, then that would have a huge impact on our spheres of influence, the people that we encounter on a daily basis. I'd love to see that happen. We're all desperate for a place to belong, for a place to be known as we truly are. The people who are coming and will be coming to branches, they're desperate for that too. So it's really important that we create a culture of healthy community as they're coming and before they get here. So that when they walk in those doors, there is a place for them to belong as they are, not as anybody thinks they should be. So far, we've just had worship service here for the most part. And the worship service is a type of community, so let's talk about that. I've talked to people who say, hey man, Sunday morning worship service, that's all the community I ever need. And when we come to church on Sunday and do what we do here, we get community, but kind of and not really, right? What we do in this room on Sundays is important. Sometimes it's life-changing, right? So it's really important that we do what we do. But we gather as a community here, but what we experience is more like proximity to one another rather than community with each other. We're gathered in rows. We're all looking forward. The focus here is on worshiping God and on teaching. So there's a form of community happening here, but it's not really a depth of community. This is a crowd event, and it's very possible to be isolated in a crowd, even a crowd like this, even a crowd this size. When we gather in rows, where teaching and accumulation of knowledge and worship is the focus, we have a form of fellowship, but it's kind of American fellowship, small f fellowship. We're missing the full experience of biblical community. We have part of it, not the whole. God designed us to experience a much deeper level of community together than we have here on Sundays, even than Sunday mornings are designed to provide. And the Bible refers to that kind of community as the Greek word is koinonia, which is translated into fellowship. Acts 2:42 says, all the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to sharing in meals, including the Lord's Supper, and to prayer. So koinonia is developing close relationships with other followers of Jesus where we know each other at the heart level. If we were to define koinonia, it would be this: to unite in spiritual partnership with a common purpose and a mutual interest. The Acts 2 church was a community of Jesus followers that had a depth of relationship that allowed them to partner in life, in faith, and on mission, which is exactly what we want to do. And that church community had a very powerful impact on the community around them. They enjoyed the goodwill of the city around them, the goodwill of all the people around them, and God added to their number every day those who were coming to know and follow Jesus. Man, if that were to be said about branches, how cool would that be? How messy and wonderful would that be? It'd be awesome. How much fun would it be to have the favor of Woodinville? If the city of Woodinville and the people in it knew that Branches was a community they could turn to, was a community that they could trust, was a community that they know cares for them first and foremost, above all else. What kind of difference would that make? Man, people would start coming to Branches and to the other churches in Woodinville, because when they're encountering you and me, they're encountering Jesus. Because we're helping each other be the hands and feet of Jesus, because we're connected in community. So to get there, though, we have to move past the safety and anonymity of isolation. We have to also move past the safety and anonymity of the row environment. We need to be the type of church and have the type of experience here that they had in Acts 2. And we can narrow down the essentials of Acts 2 into 3 words, the church in Acts 2. They were committed to growth, they were committed to caring for each other, and they were committed to being on mission together. So we want all those things. We want to be committed to spiritual and relational growth. A church that's committed to spiritual and relational growth will ultimately find that it has numeric growth. Okay, if we're caring for each other and I'll talk about this in a second, but living out the one another's of the New Testament together, then that's attractive. People will want what we have. We grow spiritually, if you didn't know, I'll just tell you, by learning what the Bible teaches, but not just that, by learning what the Bible teaches and applying that to how we live our lives. We have to have both knowledge of what's in the Bible and application. If we have just one of those things, then we tend to go down an unhealthy path. We need both because our goal is to become more passionate followers of Jesus. Our goal is to become more passionate disciples of Jesus. There was Rob Bell, before he was really controversial, back when he was just kind of controversial. He did Pneuma videos, and he had this one I love, and he would talk about how in Jesus' day, most Jewish young men, if they were educated, they wanted to be attached to a rabbi. And so they would want a great rabbi to choose them to be an apprentice or a disciple. And once you were an apprentice or a disciple, the greatest thing you could hear was for somebody else to say, may you be covered in the dust of your rabbi, right? Wherever your rabbi goes, wherever he's been, whatever he does, may he kick it up on you so that you become just like him. And the same is true with Jesus, right? That's what we want to do with Jesus. We want to be covered in the dust of our rabbi, Jesus. Wherever he's been, we want that kicked up on us. Whatever he's about, we want that to be all over us so that our lives represent what matters to him. And the only way that we can do that is to follow close enough behind him so that he can kick that stuff up on us. And we do that by, certainly one of the best ways we do it is by being in community with each other. We need to also care for each other's needs. We need to do that in the high seasons, in the low seasons, and the in-between seasons of life. We need to be there for each other. We need to do the best we can to live out the one another's of the New Testament. There are as many as 52 one another statements in the New Testament, 52 imperatives for how we should love, encourage, support, strengthen, inspire one another, and on and on. And when we put these one another's into practice, then the church becomes a living expression of Jesus. We become the living expression of Jesus that God intends for us to be. And as we give and receive comfort and strength and encouragement, our lives tend to get exponentially better. Doesn't mean that we don't have trouble. Just means that we know that even in the trouble, we've got people who are around us and a God that loves us, and we're not alone. When we are alone in trouble, we start to question all that stuff. We need each other. We need each other in small groups. It's the best context for caring for each other and to prepare for those who are yet to come. So here are a few examples of the one another's. Romans 12, 15 and 16. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Be kind to each other, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, just as God, through Christ, has forgiven you. I'm bringing this one back. This one's going to be part of our first impression team training. Our greeters are going to learn how to do this. Greet one another with a holy kiss. I don't know why we're not doing this. I think we ought to be like every week we sing doxology and maybe come to get communion and be greeted with the holy kiss. I think that somebody get that started, okay? John, I'm looking at you. That's, yeah. I mean, it's in the Bible, for crying out loud. I think we ought to be doing that. I actually said that once. I was joking, and one of my friends after church came up and kissed me on the cheek. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, you said. So yeah, don't kiss me, kiss a friend. So the Acts 2 church was also missional. They were very missional, and so are we. Our commitment is to share the gospel. We want to engage in a loving and proper, healthy way with the people that we encounter in our daily lives so that they might know Jesus, so that the gospel goes forward. We want to care for people who might be far from God but matter deeply to Jesus. We want to invest in those people because those are the people that we live next to and work with and hang out with and have a beer with or coffee with or whatever it might be. Our mission then comes directly from Jesus, from the Great Commission and Great Commandment. The Great Commission, Matthew 28, 18 and 19. Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Really, the way this is should be translated is, what the actual translation is, as you are going. As you are going, wherever you go, whatever you're doing, make disciples. And then the Great Commandment. Jesus said, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. The second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. No other commandment is greater than these. That's our mission, to make disciples, to be disciples, to make disciples, to worship God and love him so much that the overflow of our love for him is that we love our neighbors. I've been to churches where these things have been historical and aspirational. These are things we used to do, or these are things we want to do. Here at Branches, these are things that we are now doing as a newly merged church. This is what we're about. This is who we are. And Tim and I we were talking about it up at Camino Island. We were talking about how exciting it will be when we see baptisms here. And when we see transformation, which we're already seeing transformation, but more and more transformation. The signs of a healthy church, man, are when people come to faith, baby dedications and baptisms, man, that represent growth and life. God created us to be in community. Do you know who, you don't have to answer a rhetorical question. Do you know who comprised the first small group? A lot of people say the disciples, good guess, but really it's the Trinity, I can say it, the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The triune God exists in community, in close relationship, in partnership, to advance the story of God. So look at Genesis 1. Then God said, let us make human beings in our image to be like us. They'll reign over the fish of the sea, the birds in the sky, the livestock, and wild animals on earth. I'm losing my voice, sorry. And the small animals that scurry along the ground. So God created human beings in his own image. The Trinity partnered in creation. So here's how it went. God created light. He saw that there was light in the sky, and God said it was good. God created the dry ground, the land, and he said it was good. God said, let the land sprout vegetation. He saw that it did that, and God said it was good. God set lights in the sky to light the earth. He saw it, and it was good. God created man, put Adam in the Garden of Eden, saw what he had did, and said, this is not good, right? It's not good for man to be alone. The Lord said, it's not good for man to be alone. I'll make a helper who is just right for him. If it wasn't good for Adam to be alone, to be isolated, it certainly isn't good for us. So God created Eve to partner with Adam in all that he had dominion over. So by the way, if you're married and you're, okay, cool, I'm covered. I don't have to be in a group. I'll just be in a marriage. I got a spouse who loves Jesus and knows the Bible. That's awesome, but that's not so fast, okay? That doesn't work. Because Kara and I have been married for over 30 years, and on my best day, she does not want me to be her sole source of community, right? And we don't have many best days, so, or at least where I am on my best. So we need each other, right? She's not disagreeing with me, just so you know. So we need more than a spouse. So does your spouse. So do you. And we know this is true because we are all supposed to be part of this greater community of faith where each one of us, no matter what our story is, no matter what our history is, has a specific and invaluable contribution to make, okay? We need everybody. Your contribution is the only one you can make. If you don't invest, we're missing out. And we're missing out in a big way, not in a small way. So the Apostle Paul describes the church in this way as a body. He uses the metaphor as the body, or the body as a metaphor. He says in Romans 12, just as our bodies have many parts and each part has a special function, so it is with Christ's body. We are many parts of one body, and we all belong to each other. In his grace, God has given us different gifts for doing certain things well. As followers of Jesus, we find our purpose, our joy, our strength in we're missing any one person, then we're at a massive deficit. Warren Wiersbe, who was my pastor in Chicago when I was a little kid, he said, we belong to each other, we minister to each other, and we need each other. It's tragic when one gift is emphasized in a local church beyond all the other gifts. We kind of do that. We hold high the gifts of teaching and leadership because they're the public gifts, but those gifts don't mean anything and can't really function without all the other gifts functioning well. So if you're an encourager, man, do we need you in our groups. If you're somebody who prays, we desperately need you. If you're somebody that cares deeply about people who are far from God but matter deeply to Jesus, we absolutely need you. If you're a behind-the-scenes person, we'd be lost without you, okay? We need everybody. The people who make the coffee here, right? They're the ones that keep the place running, right? The guys on the tech team, right? The people you don't even see, people who don't want to be seen, right, Hans? These are, he's going to like, I told you not to call my name out, but I had to, just because he said that. But look, he's up there. He's doing his thing. We couldn't be online without him up there. So we need all the gifts and personality types partnering together in community so that we can most effectively fulfill the Great Commission and Great Commandment. Paul says in Ephesians 4:16, he makes the whole body fit together perfectly. Each part does its own special work. It helps the other parts grow so that the whole body is healthy and growing and full of love. That's what we want to be. We want to be healthy and growing and full of love. And the only way we can do that is by intentionally being in community in the best way we know how. And we each have a role to play, relationally, spiritually, emotionally. So we'll wrap it up with this passage, Philippians 2:2. Is there any encouragement from belonging to Christ, any comfort from his love, any fellowship together in the Spirit? Are your hearts tender and compassionate? Then make me truly happy by agreeing wholeheartedly with each other, loving one another, and working together with one mind and purpose. That's our calling, to work together with one mind, one purpose, to be in community together so that we can surround each other in the good times, the good seasons, and certainly when the storms hit, so that we can journey through life together, so that we can be known at the heart level, which we are all desperate to, and it's a way we're all desperate to be known, and so that we can be on mission together, so that God can use our lives in this church to change the world around us, certainly Woodinville and the towns that we live in. So I don't know if you know this, but Rooted starts next Sunday night. And I'd love to see everybody involved in Rooted. You can register on, there's a couple different ways to get to it, but you register on Planning Center. We're going to bring everybody together Sunday at 6 o'clock, but we're trying to do groups on Sunday night and Wednesday night. You should be able to differentiate which night when you register, but if not, just come Sunday night and we'll make it work for you right here. Also, it's $20 to do Rooted. If $20 is too much, don't worry about it. You're in. We'll scholarship you. There should be a way to scholarship yourself, but if you can't, shoot me an email and I'll make sure you get scholarship. All right, we're going to take communion together. It's good to take communion when you're talking about community. That's appropriate. So the way we do it here is we come down the center aisle and go out the sides. So as the band comes up, let me pray. Father, I thank you for this church and for the community that it is. There is healthy and dynamic community happening in this church, in the relationships that we have. God, our need is to take the next step and have intentional and missional community. And God, we are a group of very busy people pulled in multiple directions. Yet, God, we ask you for the ability to come together in this next season and create the type of culture that you want us to create here so that you can do the work you want to do in our lives and through our lives. That's what we want. We don't want our way, God. We want your way. And we surrender that to you. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the